Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC. Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC. Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Capital Advisory Group, Inc. is not affiliated with Kestra IS or Kestra AS. Neither Kestra IS nor Kestra AS provide legal or tax advice and are not certified public accounting firms.
You work hard for your money. For the next hour, you're going to learn how to keep what's yours. Capital Advisory Group presents Keep What's Yours. Here are Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. I'm Josh Gilbert, sitting here with Jeff Zufall. He is the Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, happy Saturday.
Have a lot to talk about today.
Tons.
Debt ceiling deal has been made.
Yes.
We're going to avert defaulting on our loans, and what did that even mean in the first place? Is it the same when I get a bill and I, you know what, credit card company, I'm not interested in paying this, you know, and then my credit rating gets a ding on it. But we talk about a lot of stuff on this show, first and foremost taxes.
Yes.
And I just want to remind everybody that, you know, now that we are in June, we've had quite a bit of separation from our tax event in April.
Yes, quite a bit.
And I think you'd be happy to know, Jeff, that my taxes are still sitting on our desk. We have not filed them away.
Good.
So I know that there's a lot of people out there that probably got their little tax booklet, or, you know, Jeff gives us this little envelope, and it's, you know, it's really nice, and, you know, oh, this is your taxes. It's like, oh, great, I never want to see them again.
That's right. Most people are like, no.
Yeah, why'd you make them look so nice? But we need to keep this stuff, and we need to file it away. But before you put it away in the filing cabinet, and this is for the people that don't go to see Jeff for their taxes, take those and bring them to Jeff.
Yes.
And say, this is what happened to me last year.
Exactly.
This is my tax last year. You know, we're halfway through the year now. Did I keep enough of my money?
Yes.
Is there more money to keep?
Is there money on the table that you could actually save this year, 2023, versus what you did last year?
I don't know who you went to get your taxes done. Did you go to one of those fly-by-night places?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, what's that Spirit Halloween store?
Yeah,
you know,
pops up, disappears, pops up, disappears.
They're only open in September and
Yes.
October,
Yeah.
And then they disappear again for 10 months. Did you get your taxes done by one of those fly-by-night places that popped up and did a lot of advertising, and then now they're gone again until next year? If so, I can't really imagine that one of those people really sat down and looked at your numbers and looked at who you are.
No, because that situation, basically those are just saying, hey, it is what it is. Here's your numbers. We're going to plug it into the tax return. Poof, you're done. Versus then stopping and saying, hey, here's what you could do. You could do this. You know, one thing might save you $500. 3 things may save you $2,000, just depending upon how deep you want to get into it.
And we'll do a little theater of the mind here, okay? the KTRS repertory players. You sit down with one of these tax people that just kind of do taxes in bulk, or maybe, you know, my uncle used to do taxes from his kitchen table.
Yeah.
That's how he'd make some money this time of year. You know, and maybe that tax person said, oh, well, you know, somebody was using an HSA, health savings account, or like we're doing it. Someone was using an FSA. And I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. How does that work? And they say, oh, I don't know, but it's out there.
It's out there.
Well, can you implement that into my life, into my taxes, onto my paycheck? No, I don't know how to do that.
It's just, hey, it said this. We're putting it on the tax return.
Good for them for bringing it up and mentioning that it's a thing.
Yeah.
But half of the time, and we do that all the time, we mention that these are things. I'm taking advantage of an FSA right now with my son's schooling. We mention that they're a thing, but how do I turn around and incorporate that into my life?
Exactly.
Well, that's
that's another
step.
setup in a sense, and a step to reach out to your human resources, start that process, figure out what's out there. What, you know, if they offer it, don't offer it. Anybody that works for a Fortune 100 company, has a deferred comp element, which you're just basically deferring income to a later date. But it saves you taxes. So the question is, if that works into your plan, that's great. But most people go, oh, I have that? And you go, yeah.
So my suggestion is we're halfway through the year now. There's still plenty of keepings.
Tons of time.
I mean, how many more paychecks are you getting this year?
Exactly.
What's
well, at least if you're
26
biweekly, you're 12.
26 divided by 2, you still got 13 checks out there.
We're not a leap year, are we?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so it'd be 12, 13.
Which is plenty. It's half. Mm-hmm. It's half of your money that you're going to make for the rest of the year. Do you want to keep some of it in your pocket?
Exactly.
And that's why you go see Jeff. 636-394-5524, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. I highly recommend you give him a call, 636-394-5524. You bring in your previous taxes and maybe a couple of paycheck stubs.
Yeah.
Jeff can just kind of do a quick overview and just be like, okay, there's something to be had here.
This is where we're at. Yeah.
I find it for a new person who probably doesn't have anything going, I can't imagine that they would walk out of there with Jeff saying, well, look, you're pretty buttoned up. Nothing more we can do. There's so much stuff written into the tax code that actually can benefit us, believe it or not.
Exactly.
But those, Congress people and all of their aides that write all these laws.
It's more the aides.
Yeah, they don't take the time to call us individually.
No.
How many people are in my district? Great. Get them all on the phone and tell them all these great tax things that we put in
put into play.
It's up to us to figure it out, and that's why we need someone like Jeff on our side to figure it out and implement it for us. 636-394-5524. Okay. Now, debt ceiling has been averted. What is the debt ceiling, just in a nutshell?
Debt ceiling basically is issued by Congress, and it says the U.S. can only spend or borrow X on an annual basis. So literally when they say they repealed it, what they're saying is they've stopped whatever the limit is and added more to it. So the easiest way to look at that is you have a credit card. You ran up to your max credit limit on your credit card, and you go, ooh, I want to spend $2,000 more. You and I can't do that. Any of the listeners can't do that. But our federal government can. And they go, hey, raise it another $2,000. What the heck? It's easy. It's only money. That's what they did. So typically, and I think I talked a little bit about this on Jennifer and Wendy's show, in the past, and I say maybe 8 to 12 years ago, 10 years ago, was never a political issue. They got together. Everybody said, hey, we need
Republican,
to spend more
Democrat,
money.
doesn't matter. Who has the House, who's got the Senate,
it wasn't
doesn't
a hot
matter.
potato. They agreed to it. Boom, they went on their merry way. And it was done months in advance. So the way that it works is Janet Yellen, since she's one of the Fed secretaries, she actually does the accounting and says originally, maybe in January, they said, hey, we're going to run out of money in September of 23. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Janet showed up and said, oh, it's June 1st. And then they said, nope, it's June 5th. So the question is, when really is it? So behind the scenes, Janet has to produce to Congress a budget, basically.
Here are the bills.
Here's the bills. This is why we need to do this. And it's not that she's trying to...
Here's the shelf that's holding all the money, and it's empty.
Yeah, and she's not trying to sell it. She's just saying, here's the numbers. This is what we have to do. And then, Congress and all those guys hash it out. So the question is did Janet kind of jump in and preempt it a little bit? And maybe it is later this year, and nobody really said anything, but at least the deal is done. So you say good, bad, indifferent. The problem is if we defaulted, no government employees get paid, military doesn't get paid, Social Security checks stop. And that's a huge repercussion coming backwards. So really we were kind of, I wouldn't say confident that they wouldn't default. Even though some political leaders, and I won't say their names, were like, yeah, we need to reset the deck. But that's a violent way to get there.
Right. Who's holding the bag?
Yeah, exactly. We are.
Yeah.
And that would be the issue. So market-wise, they're like, your IRAs and your 401ks would take a pounding, which they probably would, because if we defaulted, it's not just the U.S. concept that we're looking at. It's the international concept, and international countries come to the United States to purchase U.S. dollars because of and people are going to laugh at this, the political stability. So they don't have to worry about one side shooting the other side.
Have they lived here for any
I know.
period of time?
That's why I say it's almost a joke. But that's the reason. So what's taken place internationally, big picture, we are seeing that the BRICS companies or countries are banding together, and they're actually creating their own currency. So I think at one point in time, like 80 or 85% of all international trade was traded in dollars. And it's down to like 40-something% now. And the fear is that maybe the Chinese dollar or their yen or whatever it is versus the Russian, it kind of falls out of favor. And if those guys could work a deal and say, hey, we're going to take this over, then the dollar loses its prevalence in the world. And then we become a third world country. And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories out there and all that baloney. But again, if we defaulted on this, foreign countries would go elsewhere to park their money
because we're not going to get paid back.
Exactly.
The United States is a deadbeat.
A third world country can't pay their bills. Blah 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 blah. So that's kind of how important that is, not just us locally, but the big scope of what takes place.
So rather the people in Congress probably weren't thinking, oh well, we don't want Joey and Johnny Main Street to have to go without their Social Security check. They were probably thinking on the world stage we'll be a laughing stock and people won't buy our bonds
and
anymore.
They won't buy our U.S. Treasuries, our bonds. So it gets out there, gets pretty deep.
So again, they care. They say they care about us, but they were actually probably more caring about.
Either side, I don't think cares at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. But that's what it is. It's basically like saying, hey, I got a credit limit on my credit card. I ran right through it, and I need a couple thousand more. But we're talking add zeros to that,
right.
Like lots of them. 30.
And we are what, $30-something trillion?
34. I think the last number was $34.1 trillion.
And no one has said at this point, hey, maybe next year.
So we
should not spend more money than we take.
And again, there's a handful of Republicans and a very, very few Democrats that are saying cut the spending. They see what's taken place. But they're overshadowed by everything else that takes place, big picture. So at the end of the day, that's where we're sitting. I think it comes out to be, the number I heard was $95,000 per person. So if everybody could write a check tomorrow for $95,000, we take care of that $34 trillion. And if you do $34 trillion and write it out, it's a lot of zeros. I mean, a lot of zeros.
I can do it, but I'd have to borrow money from the federal government. So I don't know if that actually works out.
No.
So very interesting. We averted a debt catastrophe.
Near crisis. And the other thing which is funny is everybody's like, oh, if we default. And I think we talked a little bit about this. There's been 4 technical defaults historically in the past. Nobody ever talks about them. I mean, they go way back to 1862, which was basically the Civil War. So the Treasury had all kinds of issues back then. Their budget was probably $1,000, but I don't know what it was. But that was the greenbacks, which was the U.S. dollar back then. It had issues after the Civil War. So they technically defaulted for a week or so, but it's a default. And then 1933, so there were gold bonds out there that they basically, it had to go to the Supreme Court, went through all this crazy stuff, but we technically defaulted. Again, in 1968, they refused to honor what's called the silver certificates paper, so technically it's a default. And then in 1971, basically this was what's called the Bretton Woods Agreement. Easiest way that Nixon said, we're not going to go by the gold standard anymore. But it was technical default. So I think that was like 2 weeks sitting out there. So we've defaulted 4 times in the past, but nobody really brings us up. They're like, oh, that's way back in the day.
Well, that was different.
Yeah, it's always the same.
But it hasn't happened since 1971.
Exactly.
So that's...
Now, we've had some near misses. If you remember the heated debate, I think Trump When was that, his first term? They kind of shut everything down for a week or so.
Oh, yeah.
But that wasn't a default. It was just kind of a political battle to see who would win. So that's.
I remember a couple of years even before that, that CNN had that clock, that ticking clock, as they were counting down to the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this definitely feels like it's coming up more and more.
It's getting the time frame on it's getting shorter and shorter. Used to be years, maybe 3-4 years at a time. Now it's because of our debt at $34 trillion. The interest on that is a phenomenal amount. But again, it's getting shorter time frame. So they push it. I guess they raised it enough that they are pushing it, the next debate out until 2025, which hypothetically should not be a political hot potato in the election. But that somebody's going to figure out the angle how we bring this up,
right,
good or bad for both sides. Hey, they did this, they didn't do that. But again, in this package, our friends at the IRS have lost $20.1 billion of their funding.
And we'll talk about that. What was in it and what had to be sacrificed or compromised to get both sides to agree on this. Both sides said, well, we can't let this happen, but while we're here, we want this. And we want that.
Yeah.
And we don't want to give that up.
Yeah.
But we're not going to let the debt ceiling, go away. But we're going to argue about it, and right up until the time, the day after, right up until the day after.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why they pushed it to the 5th, which is actually next week or this upcoming week, versus the 1st, knowing that they would be right at the 11th hour.
Yeah, they wouldn't have enough time.
And then you still kind of technically don't have it in order. So
hey, it's January. You got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And they waited until the exact last second.
Yes.
Which just seems so them. But we'll go to commercial break. When we come back, talk more about the debt ceiling, what was in it, what got cut, and find out going forward. What can we be expecting? Jobs reports, the Fed, all that stuff. We'll get into it on Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. Give him a call if you want him to look at your stuff. And like I said, before you file those taxes away once and for all, never to be seen again until next year, it's like, what do you need the tax file number from last year's taxes, right?
Social Security number? Yeah.
Yeah. Pull those out. Keep them out. Bring them to Jeff and say, this is what I look like on paper.
Oh, 1040. The 1040s. And then if you have a company, it could be, sole proprietors, could be a LLC, partnership, all that fun stuff.
Jeff does individuals. He specializes in small businesses. He can help you keep more of what's yours. It's the name of the book that he wrote. It's the name of the show that we're doing right now, and it's the lifestyle that he lives. And, I like to live that lifestyle, too. I like to keep more of what's mine. I like sharing, but not with the government.
That's right. Somebody else.
Yeah, not more than I technically have to. 636-394-5524 is the phone number. CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back to the program, back to Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. I'm Josh Gilbert, and we're talking about the debt ceiling and what were some of the things that were cut out of this that were, people were haggling. And my take on this, Jeff, is when the bills come due and you and your wife sit down, or you and your husband or whoever, you sit down and you say, boy, this really got out of hand this month, this credit card bill. We need to figure out going forward what we need to do to make sure that we start paying this off, or maybe not charging more than what we've got coming in and all this stuff. And you sit down and you start having a conversation about budget. You don't let 30, 60, 90 days go by without paying the bill off. You can't. While you're still arguing or talking about but we can cut out cable. And no, I don't want to cut out cable. Yeah. Maybe you can ride your bike to work and save on some gas. You don't argue about that stuff while leaving the bill unpaid. You paid the bill.
Pay the bill and then work it out later.
And then you figure it out later. But it started to seem like they were arguing the bill.
Yes.
Without paying it. And they wanted reassurances, I guess, leverage being
sure
what it
is.
is.
Well, and
we're not going to vote to pay the bill unless you put this stuff in there.
Put this in. And you got to realize both parties come to the table with an agenda, which is this is what we want. We want to, increase spending here for these pet projects. Republicans said, and again, we're still kind of waiting to see the big picture on how this all panned out. Republicans were like, "Oh, we want you to cut spending." I think there was that handful of like 5 or 8 Republicans that were adamantly they voted against it because they said that the spending still was not under control. And a handful of Democrats had said the same thing.
And they can do that because they know that the rest of
will still pass
the party
it,
still
and
pass
we're okay.
it. They can make this kind of
grandstanding.
This is Congress after all.
Yeah.
Political theater.
Oh,
Give
big
me a
time.
break.
Yep.
They can make these points, and I think I even heard one of the senators from both sides say, "Well, I'm not going to vote for it, but I know it's going to pass.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to vote for it because I'm going to protest X, Y, Z,
and say that it should be this or that."
Okay, great, whatever.
Yeah. That's where the dysfunction comes into play. But
right.
I know they said that military spending stays flat for I guess the next 3 years or something of that effect. The big one is IRS gets cut at $20 billion.
And that was a big headline that I perked up because we talk about this all the time.
Which the IRS has the funding, and again, from I say the Republican Party says that they have enough. So this $20 billion was actually what they're hypothetically saying was the enforcement side. So that's where they hire the enforcement officers or revenue agents to go out and collect tax.
So not even in that Inflation Reduction Act, but I think in the infrastructure bill, the IRS got $80 billion over the next 10 years.
10 years.
And we've talked about this on the show almost every other week because Jeff is someone that works in taxes and he has to call the IRS from time to time.
On a regular basis.
And no one picks up the phone.
No.
They don't have enough employees.
Just recently we've seen some improvements because they've hired 5,000 people in service centers to help answer the phone. Problem is those people aren't up to speed yet and they don't know exactly what to do. Give them time. Hopefully they will. Or if they could hire more people, literally you're just talking to do the basic paperwork on a daily basis that needs to take place. That's what
they don't have that,
and they don't have it yet.
We've seen the Washington Post picture slideshow that they posted up a couple years ago of what it's like in one of these offices: Ogden, Utah, Austin, Texas, and KC, right?
Yeah, or 3.
This is where they are, and they're just stacked to the ceiling of boxes of paper, and that's our stuff.
Yeah.
And they just don't have the manpower, the people power to get through it all. And not only that, they don't have the technology.
The technology is the big issue to run, I say, paperless. There's in the accounting or the tax world, the paperless office is a joke. It really doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Still can't figure out how that would exist. Just because of the flow of documentation that moves back and forth.
But their computers are old. The systems that they're working off of are like from the 70s.
70s, yeah.
It is, frankly.
Windows 98 or something crazy like that. And
it's kind of a joke, and I don't understand how it got to this point.
Not enough funding. The computer systems are so antiquated it's not funny. And if they can get up to speed, I say tax geek, there's cool stuff that they could do. Like right now, we just have the ability, if you amend a tax return, that you could have a ACH deposit if you get a refund. In the past, you had to sit, 1, mail it in and wait for them to acknowledge your amended return, and 2, wait for a check to show.
Yeah.
That's a long, grueling process.
This is the federal government right now. Why are we still mailing them anything?
Exactly.
How much money is that costing us to have someone dump out a big bag of things and just
start
open
going
the
through
envelopes?
it, and then they have to rekey it in their system to make it match. And there are some tricks you can do with the tax return. Certain lines that you take as you key it, and they'll feed to the other line. You know that you're okay as long as your numbers match.
And I imagine that there's a subset of the population out there that likes to do it the old-fashioned way. They're not.
I don't think they'll
familiar
accept
with computers
a
or anything?
handwritten. I think I saw my last handwritten tax return last year.
Wow, really?
And it was from another preparer that we had a couple of people that came in, and he had retired.
Yeah, okay.
And it literally was handwritten. I was impressed, seriously. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
To take the forms and be able to take the numbers and push it to the next form, keep your math going in a sense. I'm like, ooh, but that's time consuming.
And the idea was, let's give them a bunch of money over the next 10 years. They can update all of the computer systems. They can hire more people to answer the phones. They can get up to speed. We can get this office out of the 1950s and into the 21st century. And during this whole debt ceiling talks, the Congress people were able to take back $20 billion of that.
Yeah.
And
they'll probably work on more of it going forward, unfortunately.
Because there's people out there that don't want to give the IRS more money.
They've kept them defunded for a long time.
There's a reason why they were defunded and so poorly funded in the first place. But we had mentioned that enforcement.
Yes.
And the whole idea was, let's give them more money to go out and find the tax cheats.
Yes.
And the low-level you make a mistake, okay, we'll give you an opportunity to prove it.
Yeah.
But if you are purposely withholding tax money from the federal government, they're going to come after you.
Yep.
And how much revenue? They said that just generating the revenue of the taxes that are supposed to be paid would pay for all of this,
easily.
Now,
that's going to be a little pain for some people who we see them since technically probably 2019 coming forward. Tax returns are just kind of very loosey-goosey because they know that the IRS is behind. But again, at the end of the day, the IRS can come back and look at 3 years' worth of returns or go 3 years backwards. You could amend 3 years and fess up. Which we've done on a bunch, where people are like, hey, I kind of forgot this, but nobody ever said anything. And our response is you need to amend that return and carry it forward. And, you may owe some tax, but it's going to keep you out of jail.
Yeah.
So,
and look, I pay my taxes. Why should someone else not have to?
Exactly. I mean, that's not fair to do that at the end of the day.
Right. And here, I say it all the time on this show, we are here to tell you that if you don't like paying your taxes, well, fine. That's tough, tough noogies. But there is a way to hire Jeff Zufall to pay as little as possible.
As long as you stay within the guardrails, you're safe.
I don't mind.
Could go right up against the edge of the guardrail, but
I don't mind paying taxes, but I do mind paying more than what I should have to.
Exactly.
So Jeff opens up your books and looks at what's going on and says, we could do this, we could do that. We could walk right up to the line here and then move everything over here to make sure we're still in the good graces of the IRS.
Exactly.
And make sure that you never get arrested for tax fraud.
Yeah.
And you pay less in taxes.
If you ever got audited, because, again, audit rates are super low. I mean, very low these days. If you ever got audited, could you prove everything on your tax return? Because they're basically going to quiz you to say, hey, you took this deduction. Where's your receipt?
And Jeff's got the receipts.
Yeah, and we've got them. We have a digital vault. Digital vault holds all that data. If we don't have it when we do your return, we ask for it, and we ask, you may drop it off, might fax it in, might email it, which we still don't want to do, but we'll take that and upload that to the vault. All that data is there.
And I get where the argument comes in. Well, we don't want to fund the IRS so they can just come after and nickel and dime the little guy.
Yeah, but no.
But the little guy is cheating on his taxes.
There's a bunch that, like the PayPal thing, which is the 1099Ks or Qs. I'm sorry. So the issue is you run a small business. People have figured out that they could run PayPal, and they'll run it right up. The rule is $20,000 or 200 transactions. Mm-hmm. They'll run right up to $19,500 and quit using PayPal and go to whatever.
Something else.
And they'll go somewhere else. But they'll never report that money because they're not kicking off that 1099 to them for business income.
And is that illegal?
Extremely.
Extremely
That's
illegal.
What the IRS – so everybody thinks, oh, man, as a small business owner – it's me they're going to come kick in my front door. They're not looking for that. They're looking for those people that have figured out that angle in the system that will run $19,500 on PayPal and then switch and do $19,500 on another one and keep doing that and never report it because nobody ever kicked them off a 1099.
Yeah.
So
and you might be able to say, well, I didn't have to do that before. Well, it was still illegal.
Exactly.
They just didn't have enough people to come after everybody.
Yeah.
And that,
and that's
why
the
thing with all crime.
Yeah.
It's like if the cops aren't going to give out tickets on Highway 70,
everybody's going to do
that's
100
why
miles an
everyone's
hour.
doing 80, 90 miles per hour.
That's in the slow lane, man.
Right. Okay. Well, I take 40 whenever I can. So it seems to be a political football, but it really isn't. It
isn't at the end of the day.
Making people pay their taxes.
You just don't want them to go to the opposite extreme, which is where they really do start picking on people for normal stuff. Or even if you produce statements, they're like, we don't care, you owe it, So that's kind of what people are panic-stricken on. But again, the people with targets on their backs are small business owners, period.
Yeah.
That's where they're going to start because that's a low-lying fruit.
If you're having Jeff run your small business taxes for you, you probably don't have anything to worry about.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, if I go to an audit, I'm going to be able to lay everything down and say, here's the stuff.
Yeah.
What's your problem?
What happens when I come? Hey, Jeff, I want to keep some of this money, under the table. Let's keep it hush hush, and especially don't tell my wife.
Because those people, we say thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
My license isn't worth getting jerked because, I'm helping you cheat.
I've had so many business owners that deal in stuff like this. Stuart, the mortgage guy, says, I'm not going to do anything illegal because this is my livelihood.
Exactly. At the
I'm
end
not
of the
going to
day,
get popped just because you wanted a cheaper mortgage or just because you wanted to hide some taxes.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, Jeff has told me this before. If you never say this out loud. Well, I never had to pay taxes on that last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. The IRS is going to say, really?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's go back.
Let's go back and look.
And take a peek at how long you have been avoiding paying your taxes.
And so you can amend they typically will look back 3 years. You can amend 3 years worth of returns. But if they deem fraud, it's unlimited. They can go back to when you're 16 and pull everything coming forward if they wanted to go that crazy. Could you prove, hey, I made $5,000 when I was 17? I couldn't if I had to today.
I couldn't either.
There's no way.
I couldn't. So the IRS is getting cut by $20 billion.
Yeah.
And the CBA, which looks at things and how will this affect us going forward, says that by cutting the enforcement of the IRS to go after tax dodges, collect the taxes that are supposed to be owed, we're actually losing out on $40 billion.
Exactly.
So, okay. By making people pay taxes is actually putting money in the coffers.
Yes.
Boy, what a novel idea.
Yeah.
And, I don't understand why maybe people are saying, well, we don't want them to enforce because we want to cheat on our taxes.
Well, that could be it too.
Right.
Look at how everybody in Congress is a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
They come in with nothing. They make $171,000 a year, which is good money. Don't get me wrong. But even locally,
3 years later, they're worth $10 million.
Exactly.
How'd that happen?
Yeah, how'd that happen?
How did that happen?
Sure wasn't off good saving habits. Right. It's because they got access to deals. There's a handful of them that they were showing that got in on NVIDIA, which the stocks went crazy last week.
This is a chip maker.
They're a chip maker. So they're saying that they're the exclusive chip maker now to AI, artificial intelligence. I'm talking it skyrocketed, and then there was a couple of Twitter reports that said, hey, these, and I won't name them, these politicians had their hand, they bought it the day before that was announced.
How'd that happen?
The odds on that, you're just either really, really lucky or something that nobody else does.
They really are, it seems like sometimes a protected class.
Oh, yeah, it is.
And there's, 100 senators and 500 something representatives.
Yep. And the funny part is the new ones that come in, the first bill they bring to the table is, hey, you can't inside trade. looks great on paper, and every one of them dies on the vine before it even gets voted on.
And then those new, I'm going to go to Washington and change these things. Yeah. You're like, oh my gosh, I can make a lot of money.
A lot of money. Okay, and I converted. I'm now on that side. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Remember that insider trading bill?
Oh, no, that's not good.
Let me just pull that off the table. So that's, everybody really knows how that works, but, you would like it to be less transparent sometimes.
And again, they come back to that, very transparent you would like, or, hey, I'm volunteering for 2 years and I'm going to help change the world, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
It's too deep. So.
All right. So, what did you say? $87 billion in payroll taxes were lost last year?
Yes. So one of the things the IRS is going after is payroll taxes. And so that's where you get into these people who are running that scam in a sense. They're hiding money to the side. That's what the IRS is looking for. And so within payroll taxes, so if you are a subcontractor, but you should really be an employee, IRS is looking at that. And so there's a distinction.
Let's talk about how that works. Payroll taxes, I look at my check and say, well, they withheld this much for Social Security and this much for Medicare and this much for whatever. On the other side of that, my employer, Mr. Dorsey, is kicking in the same exact amount for that.
He's a nice guy, but it's not on because he loves doing it. It's because he's forced to.
They're making him do it. So what some people have figured out is, well, if I hire Josh as a contractor, the taxes get taken out of his paycheck, but they don't get taken out of the company's because he's not technically a full-time employee.
Not an employee. So don't have to issue benefits. That's one of the big ones. It's way easier for the employer just to write a 1099, but it puts all the tax onus back on the individual. And then the question is there cash being paid? They hand, hey, this week I'm just going to pay you cash. That goes off the record in a sense.
That's classic.
No, it's totally classic. So the issue, and a lot of people do not pay attention to this, on your paycheck, 6.2% goes to Social Security. 1.45 goes to Medicare. Those are items that you will use later in life. And you pay into the system, and I know it's goofed up, but you pay into that system so at a later date you get those I won't say entitlements by no means, but you get those benefits at a later date. The employer matches that dollar for dollar. So let's say that you're a tax cheat and you're trying not to pay into that system. You just kind of messed yourself up long term because the less you pay into the system, the less your benefits will be at a later date.
Spent 15 years getting paid under the table.
Yeah. And
Did you save any of that money?
Probably didn't save any of it. 2, you show up for Social Security and they're like, hey, you get $100 a month.
Yeah.
And you go, wait a minute, I need way more than that.
Well, we haven't shown you working for the last 15 years.
And that happens all the time.
So, and what happens to that person?
They basically get $100 a month, Social Security or whatever that number is, and they're on their own.
They have to keep working.
Yep.
So that's $87 billion in payroll taxes lost last year?
Yes.
Last year alone?
Last year alone. So that is one thing that they're going to come out with a vengeance when they do have this enforcement arm and looking for that, like maybe the W-2s or the master W-3 that you submit, they don't match. It's just they have all these little – they won't tell us what their tricks are in a sense, but they have ways to look at that and figure out what's going on.
And the IRS in the original bill was getting $80 billion over 10 years.
Yes.
And payroll taxes, if they even caught half of it,
they could offset it right there.
They could offset it in 2 years and pay for it. It pays for itself.
Yeah.
Just collecting the taxes that are owed. I don't think anybody listening right now would have a problem collecting the taxes that are owed.
That's the issue of the day. So. So again, I'll say the defunding or low funding, if you want to call it that, of the IRS has been an issue for years. COVID really, really put the spotlight on it, and here we are today. So they had it, and it's kind of taken away, but we'll see how it goes. Because again, 2024 elections, so the debt ceiling has been put off to 25. So whoever actually wins the 24 election, you got to also remember. All of Trump's tax cuts out there, there's a ton of them, and I'll explain what's permanent and what's temporary. everything that he put on the table in his 2019, 18 tax cuts, or 17, literally expire in 2025. So whoever wins the 24 election, one of the main things they get to do is reset the tax completely.
Code. No pressure, anyone.
Yeah, no pressure by no means, believe me. And there's a ton of stuff out there that Trump put in play that it's good for us. I mean, it's good for small business owners. A lot of people just don't realize it until they go, hey, I got that? Cool, So
there's good stuff in there to keep. There's good
stuff that needs to be kicked out, but the bulk of that stuff is decent in the big picture.
So everybody knows a business owner. And let's be honest with ourselves. Maybe we even worked for someone like this that said, hey, I'm just going to pay you in cash under the table to keep you off the books.
Yep.
I mean, I'm thinking of one person specifically right now. I won't say their name out loud.
Don't say it.
But that affected the economy to the tune of $87 billion in lost payroll taxes last year alone. Alone.
1 year.
You say, well, what does it matter if he pays his employees under the table? $87 billion in payroll taxes lost alone last year. So how about that? You want to start paying off that debt? That's
part of it. That's the $37.1 trillion.
Yeah. That just keeps adding up. Yes, we have to stop spending, but we have to start collecting what's owed in as well. So let's go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the jobs reports, the Fed. Will they raise interest rates? Where is inflation at right now? And call it a day. Jeff Zufall, it's nice to hear your voice and not have to worry whether or not we're going to hit that debt ceiling. We've got a deal in place. What was in it? Well, that's to be determined.
Yeah.
But if you are nearing your own debt ceiling and you're like, something's got to give. If you're a small business and you know we sell a lot. We are very busy. We've got a ton of business. I just don't know how we're not making money.
Yes.
Give Jeff a chance to look over your books. I can guarantee you he can find something and say, look, a separate set of eyes. Sometimes is really all
Second
it takes.
set of eyes looking at it. Maybe
and someone who knows what they're
suggestions.
doing.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't Jeff's first rodeo.
Yeah. And a lot of people do not understand how to read a financial profit loss.
Yeah.
Cash flow report.
You might be a great florist. You might be fantastic at screen printing T-shirts, but you know nothing about business.
At the end of the day.
And frankly, accounting.
Yeah.
But there's a
Most
reason
people.
why we're florists and not accountants.
Like, debit, credit.
Yeah. So let Jeff take a look at it and actually make you make some money. 636-394-5524, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. Keep what's yours. We'll be back to wrap it up right after this.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back on the show, back on the program, Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. Just a couple minutes left here, Jeff. And the economy, the May jobs report, the job postings, the Fed. What are we looking at here?
All right. So the unemployment report that just came out Thursday showed unemployment increased just a touch. We're at 3.7, was at 3.4. But what they're saying is the underlying data of that report still showed surprising strength. So that's the question that the Fed has to debate now. Typically, by the Fed raising rates, they slow the economy down. Unemployment hypothetically comes up, but you're only talking a couple of tenths of a percent increase. And with the underlying strength, that's very questionable what the Fed's doing. Word on the street, if you want to call it that, is in their June meeting, they're going to maybe not raise rates. But again, I think that at the end of the day, if this data that's coming out is showing strength still, they may go a quarter. But again, the general consensus is they skip this June meeting and do not raise rates. Inflation, and this is one of the gauges that they're looking at, inflation actually went down again month to month. So we were at 4.98%. We're at 4.93% as of just the other day.
It doesn't seem like a lot, but 0.05%.
You got to picture it on the GDC of the country. A couple of tenths of a percent is huge.
Huge. Okay.
But again, and I don't say, oh, inflation isn't there. Again, the target is 2 to 2.5% is where the Fed's, that's their target.
So we're still running.
Still running high.
Last year, though, it was 9%.
Oh, it was 9+. So it's come way down. But remember, it's X, food, and oil. So in the mid-'80s, they adjusted the inflation rate, and they took out food and oil to help equalize the chart, if you want to call it that. But what are the two things that you do every day?
Guess what I buy every week? The only thing I ever buy every week is gas and food.
And that's it. Everything else, it might be a couple weeks. You might go a month without it.
When's the last time I bought a microwave?
Exactly.
You know?
Well, that's the funny part is there was a news report, I won't say what channel, and they said grocery prices have gone down. And I think they said like muffins were down like 2.4%. But at the bottom of the chart, spread was still up 7.5% year to date. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So it was just bizarre the way they tried to sell that as, oh, inflation's going away.
It's not as bad as it was last year.
Oh, no, it's not as bad as it was last year, but some stuff is still
pre-pandemic
crazy.
level.
Yeah.
It is still wild.
Yeah, it's still up there. So that's an issue that the Fed, again, in their ultimate wisdom, is trying to correct, adjust. And if they go, that's what's called the hard landing. If they go too far too fast, they raise rates through the roof. They literally bring the economy to a screeching halt, like in the 80s. And if they don't do enough, maybe this factor goes down, but 6 months from now it spikes again, and we go right back through that same process. So to be determined going forward, but the consensus out there is that the Fed will hold tight and see, again, giving time for what they've done in the past to see what it really does to the economy. And we kind of take it from there.
And I read a story this week is PepsiCo, talking about Doritos. And they said our margins are high, and we might actually increase our margins next year. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, I don't really speak this lingo all the time, but isn't margins the difference between cost to produce and what they're selling it for? So if shipping and all this stuff and cost of raw materials, if that goes up, I would expect to pay more.
Exactly.
That's inflation. Yeah. But they're talking about, well, the cost to produce them is still X, but we're still going to charge a quarter more next year.
And that's
just to make money.
That's the COVID theory, which was through COVID, businesses raised their prices, if you want to call it that. I mean, again, looking at the horizon, they didn't know what was going on. They raised their prices, but they've never brought their prices back down.
And they've realized, yeah, you know what? They will pay 50 cents more a bag of chips.
There's a pain point.
There's no reason why we should lower the prices.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's their attitude. So that's why the Fed cannot get corporate profit. That's part of, by raising interest rates, you slow the overall economy down because to borrow money, it costs you way more. Everybody sees that today. And two, the corporate profits as you go forward will start to shrink because people hypothetically buy less products. But if you play that game on where's that pain point out there where you will not buy, your Doritos or your Diet Coke or whatever, that's what they've kind of, I guess, researched in depth so that people are still doing it.
Yeah, and it's like, do I want to live in a world without Cool Ranch Doritos?
Exactly.
Am I just going to pay their high prices?
Yep.
That's a decision that I have to make personally on the local level. But home sales are slow. Refinances are
non-existent.
Paused.
Yes, they basically Citibank's laid off a ton of mortgage brokers. Chase has laid off a ton. Just there is no refinancing going on.
The rates are just too high.
Rates are too high.
Why are you going to trade in your 3%
exactly.
for 6%?
Yeah. Again, supply demand on the sales. That's what they're saying. Like in the regional area, there is no supply, so the demand's still up, and people will still pay a 5 3/4 or 6% interest rate, which again, at the end of the day, isn't terrible. I mean,
it's better than renting.
Exactly. Well, but also you got to go back. I think my first house was a 9 1/4 interest rate. Didn't think anything of it because that was what we walked into.
But if you're already in a house and you're already at 3%, you might say, well, I'm not going to refinance or move.
Anybody under the age of 40, maybe 45 or less, has never seen interest rates that high.
When you told me that, I called my mom when I left here and I said, what was your interest rate on that house in Fox Plains? And she told me, and I go, whoa! whoa.
There was 13, 14, 15% interest rates that people paid it. Now, again, the price of a house, average price might have been $50,000, $60,000 back then. Today they're $450,000. So the interest alone will kill you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I know a woman that does mortgages, and she put in a pool last year. Mm-hmm. I'm just hoping that she saved some of her money because that was high tide.
That's right, to put water in it. So
yeah, right, that's true. High tide the past couple of years, and now the interest rates being what they are,
it slows a lot of people will either be marked out of the market, which means they can't afford the interest rates, or they say, hey, I'm going to sit tight and wait.
I'm not going to refinance.
And see what happens.
I'm not going to take that cash out because I'd just be using that to pay my mortgage.
Exactly.
All right, Jeff Zufall, what is your number? Well, it's 636-394-5524. Give him a call. Go to CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. Again, if you still have your taxes sitting out on your desk, you haven't filed them away, keep them out.
Yes.
Take them to Jeff and say, this was me last year. Is there anything more I can be doing going forward, paycheck to paycheck, on a monthly, on a yearly basis, to make my life better and to keep more of my money?
Yes. Rather
than going out to the federal government? Jeff can take a look and say yes or no, and I got a good idea. If you're not doing anything right now,
yes,
he's got a
little bit we can help you with.
A couple of tricks in his bag. 636-394-5524. Keep what's yours. CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.